Welcome to the Wasatch Wildlife Watch 2023 field season training. So just as an overview, we're going to start with the need for the project and some background, and take you through the field schedule as well as the study area, details on how to install your camera, and a checklist for when you're in the field, as well as going through some frequently asked questions and some common mistakes. So this first section, again, we're just going to be chatting about the need for the project and giving you some background, and we'll also get to some introductions here in a minute. My name is Mary Pendergast. I'm an ecologist and I work with Sageland Collaborative. Just a little bit about what we do. Our priorities are promoting habitat connectivity, protecting species and conservation need, and restoring vital habitats. And our strategy for doing these things is by applying objective conservation science. We establish strategic partnerships and facilitate community engagement. And all of this is in service of wildlife through science. So a bit about how we work at Sageland Collaborative. We're always working to support wildlife and habitat conservation, and often the mechanism to do that involves answering some basic ecological questions about where important habitats are located and how native species are using those habitats. And to answer those questions in a meaningful way that can really support developing tools and strategies that decision makers need, like our partners at federal and state wildlife agencies. We often end up collecting lots of data in the field, and we do this making sure that we're using robust scientific research protocols and consistent methods, which is why it is often crucial to have academic partnerships as well. And last but not least, it's often vitally important that we also engage community scientists like you, which enables us to gather data across larger geographic areas and collect that information in a timely manner so that wildlife and habitat managers have the information they need to make informed decisions. So again, for projects like this, like Wasatch Wildlife Watch, it takes lots of community partners, local, regional, national, and international partnerships we'll discuss later in this presentation. And with that, I'll give our crucial academic partner, Austin Green, an opportunity to introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Austin Green. I am now a postdoctoral research fellow at the Science Research Initiative at the University of Utah. And it's a new program designed around undergraduate research, but I'm lucky enough to really be able to continue the project that I did as a graduate student, which many of you probably remember me as, which was Wasatch Wildlife Watch. So I'm super stoked to be able to continue to this project and to work on it with a little bit different capacity, but it's still coming from the University of Utah.
Thanks, Austin. And with that, it's my pleasure to provide you some background on Wasatch Wildlife Watch. And first, we'll give you a bit of context on the study area. The central Wasatch Mountain Range is comprised of approximately 32,400 acres. And you can see that represented here mostly in green, the polygons on this map here. Now compare that hectare area to over 345,000 hectares that make up all 5 of Utah's national parks combined, and take a moment to think about the fact that the annual recreation and tourism visitation numbers have been roughly equivalent for the past several years for those 2 land areas. So as you can imagine, with the ever increasing traffic in and out of the central Wasatch Mountains and the adjacent urban areas, there's much planning to be done, both in terms of vehicle transportation and recreational activities, so that we can ensure we maintain our native wildlife habitats and populations whilst managing for increased human activity and use. So this is especially important work in light of the transportation planning efforts going on right now, which identify the need to fill some basic data gaps on wildlife, including how they move, where their corridors are, crucial habitat use areas throughout the season, before this increase in alteration to the landscape, both in the mountains as well as along the adjacent urban areas here. So cue Wasatch Wildlife Watch. We have these data gaps, we have this baseline information we want to gather about how wildlife use those habitats before they get further fragmented. So starting in 2018, Sageland Collaborative, in partnership with Austin Green at the University of Utah's Biodiversity and Ecology Lab, we've been engaging community scientists to support this long-term landscape scale data collection effort for wildlife, along what we've referred to as the wild-urban interface. So here you can see a map of the Central Wasatch with different colored polygons indicating the mixture of habitat types and the level of human activity along the wild-urban interface. And we just want to give you a quick summary of some of the engagement outcomes on the project to date. So 950 trail camera sites have been established. 27,000 survey days have been logged, so active cameras during those days. And over 75,000 wildlife detections have been made across 28 mammal species. And just from the last field season in 2022, 175 additional sites were established, over 2,500 volunteer hours logged, and over 10,000 wildlife detections and 5,500 survey days were logged. So Wasatch Wildlife Watch community science gathered data have contributed to over 16 publications to date. And there's more in the works, more coming. And we also wanted to share in this time some of the more recent research findings with you. So as you can imagine, as ecologists, wildlife biologists, trying to support conservation planning, we're really interested in understanding the effects of humans and their influence on wildlife behavior. And data from Wildlife Watch is helping us do exactly that. So for example, in this recent paper, we questioned whether the increases in human recreational activity during the weekend affected mammal activity patterns. And here you can see that human activity does increase on the weekend. You can see the much larger statistically significant activity on the weekend. However, the pattern of that activity changes drastically from weekday to weekend. So you can see weekday is this line in red, and weekend is this dashed blue line. So weekday activity is concentrated more during the early morning and late evening, while weekend activity occurs more during that period in the middle of the day. And this change in human activity pattern led to a lack of behavioral responses across mammal species, with species picked up by cameras showing little to no response to weekend human activity as compared to the weekday activity. So this study, which is just recently published, with Austin being the lead author in the Journal of Animal Behavior, really highlights an important point for management: the possibility that altering the timing of human activity and human presence patterns, especially during periods of high recreation use, could serve as a human-wildlife conflict mitigation strategy. So this is really helpful to know when you are, say, planning for hiking and biking trail networks, say in the foothills and in the national forest areas, like we are right now in the Wasatch. Another recent publication, you can see here a map showing the Highway 80 corridor indicated in red, that bright red line, and what's essentially a heat map indicating different levels of habitat use by mammals picked up on our trail cameras across the study area. So this example map is looking specifically at mountainland habitat and showing dramatically less habitat use south of the Highway 80 corridor. So these sort of data are what we really need in order to get a better understanding of where the best locations may be for developing things like wildlife overpasses and underpasses to help facilitate their safe movement across the landscape. So during a follow-up study conducted in 2019, we found that forest cover and human population density had a much stronger effect on mammal community composition, in other words, where the different species occur on the landscape, than the interstate. And this was after the implementation of the wildlife bridge that you see pictured here. So the wildlife overpass or bridge is thought to be facilitating dispersal across this highly fragmented portion of the landscape. And this concept is a new research focus with our different publications and partnerships moving forward. So really exciting, useful stuff. Another publication we wanted to highlight is a temporal behavior study, which indicates some interesting relationships between predator and prey dynamics, particularly where human activity is highly concentrated. So in these figures, you can see the time of day on the x-axis here, and then the animal behavior on the y-axis. So on the left, you see the mule deer activity. You see mule deer activity on the right, coyote activity on the left. And what you might notice is a spike in coyote activity in the early morning and late evening where humans are not as active. And we're starting to see much more activity with mule deer shifting to be more active during the day, particularly where there's more people out recreating, which indicates mule deer having a preference for human interactions and kind of using those as protection from predation by coyotes. So this, of course, can create some interesting cases of mismatched timing of your typical predator-prey relationships. So understanding how species alter their behavior, for example, mule deer using the Salt Lake City areas as a refuge from predation, especially when they're raising their young, can be extremely useful for wildlife managers and conservation planning decisions. So Wasatch Wildlife Watch has also become a partner in 2 international camera trapping collaborations. The first of this is the Urban Wild Information Network, or UWIN. UWIN is dedicated to understanding how wildlife occupy and adapt to urban environments. So since joining this network, Wasatch Wildlife Watch has become the largest contributor of the network, which now spans 40 cities and 4 countries and 3 continents. And since joining the network, we've added to UWIN's 4 international research studies, including investigations of the link between species life history traits and urbanization, as well as the link between neighborhood wealth and mammal species diversity, and the urban adaptability of native mammals. So here we can see an example of a recent UWIN partner publication that describes the traits of native species and how we can predict whether or not they'll be able to adapt to shifting urban environmental conditions. Another big collaboration Wasatch Wildlife Watch contributes to is the Snapshot Initiative. It's the largest camera trapping project in the world. It was started in 2019, and Snapshot has resulted in over 6,000 camera study locations across the world, providing enough data to monitor over 80 different mammal species. Wasatch Wildlife Watch is ranked currently as the 12th largest contributor to Snapshot, which now has well over 200 contributors. Snapshot Initiative has led to 9 publications, including investigating the effects of humans and predators on species like the gray fox, the loss of ecosystem functional diversity across the United States, and many more research inquiries. So one example of another partner publication with Snapshot is looking at how we can monitor trends on native mammal populations and how they're doing just in general over time across the US. Another recent example is a study looking at how to monitor trends in how species respond to shifting habitat conditions, particularly in urban areas. And just to wrap up, we also have some exciting developments for Wildlife Watch. And you'll notice I said Wildlife Watch, not just Wasatch. We're hoping to expand the study area. We're working closely with folks at the Division of Wildlife Resources and the Migration Initiative for the state of Utah, and asking questions, ecological questions with them about where vehicle wildlife collisions are really a problem and where we might have fencing projects that could improve migration and movement and safe movement of wildlife across the landscape, and how having more camera data about habitat use of our native species could really inform some of those planning decisions on the landscape. So we may be putting together sooner than later a list of folks who would be interested in being on a kind of rapid response team to getting more information about wildlife and their movement with specific wildlife and habitat management questions in mind. So please stay tuned. We're really excited about next steps for the project. And if you have any questions about this portion of the training or future sections of the training, please feel free to reach out to Austin or myself. If you are participating in the training, you've probably gotten emails from us, but we're happy to hear from you with whatever questions you all may have. Thank you so much.